Today on Upfront, primary battles for Congress and state Senate. Next, a former state senator facing a challenge from the right. Why candidate Jonathan Stites says Van Wanggaard isn't a reliable conservative, and that the state Senate needs more reformers. Plus, former state Senator Gary George challenging Democratic Congresswoman Gwen Moore. Why he thinks voters will overlook his past. And a building boom on the border. Why so many businesses are choosing Kenosha County.
Covering the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Up Front with Mike Goucher.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Up Front. This may be a holiday weekend for most of us, but not for candidates running for political office. They're hard at work, especially those facing off in the August 12th primary. There are several key primary races to watch this year, and today and in the coming weeks on Up Front, we'll be taking a closer look at some of them. We begin with the redrawn 21st Senate District, Western Racine and Kenosha counties, in a battle between two Republican candidates. Former Senator Van Wanggaard is seeking re-election to the 21st District seat. He held it under the old district boundaries, but lost the seat in the 2012 recall election. In the primary, Wanggaard will face Jonathan Stites of Pleasant Prairie, another recall election veteran, having challenged and lost to Democratic Senator Bob Wirtz of Kenosha. Jonathan Stites joins us now on Up Front. It's good to have you back on the program.
Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate you having me. It's good to be here.
Let's talk about what this race boils down to. Is it a contest where the question is who is the most conservative candidate?
Well, I don't think the main question is who is the most conservative. I really like to say who's going to be the most reliably conservative candidate and who's going to really be a leader and be able to push the issues that are important to conservatives forward. And I think that my background in having a businessman in government, which we desperately need, I'm going to be in a better position to really to lead the charge on the reforms that we need to see happening in Wisconsin.
You're frustrated that the state Senate is not necessarily holding up its end of the bargain in terms of pushing a conservative agenda.
Well, I think that's right. Look, we've done a lot under Governor Walker from a conservative standpoint in the last 4 years, but we still have a long ways to go. We're still one of the highest tax states in the country. We have a lot of reform to get done, and I think that, you know, we have a strong majority in the Assembly. We obviously have a reform-minded governor, but time and time again, you know, our good ideas get killed or watered down in the Senate, and I think having one or two more solid conservative voices in the Senate is going to make a huge difference in Governor Walker's second term, and the 21st District, being a brand new district that's a very conservative district, is a great opportunity for us to make some traction and some headway in the Senate. And
would your opponent, Van Wanggaard, not be conservative enough to represent that district?
Look, it's not a matter of whether he's conservative enough. You know, I think Van was a perfect candidate for the 48% Republican district that the 21st used to be. This is now almost a 60% Republican district. There have been issues, and people in the district remember, where he has, in my opinion, not led the charge on conservative causes. You know, he was one of the last, in my opinion, he wasn't strong on Act 10. He really waffled on that. People remember that. You know, there have been other issues where I don't think he's been as strong as he could be and what we should have in this new 21st district.
Let's talk about some of those issues for a moment. One place where the two of you differ is on the income tax, state income tax. You'd like to see it eliminated. He says that's unrealistic. How do you replace the revenues that would be lost if you eliminated the income tax?
Look, when I'm talking about income tax reform, first of all, it's a long-term goal, and I don't think you need to look at eliminate or how you replace the revenue. That's not where I begin with income tax. The problem with government is not that we don't have enough money coming in, it's that we have too much money going out. So the first thing we need to do is look at how we continue to reduce the size of government and limit growth. Limit the growth of government and limit spending. In my opinion, the reason that I'm really focused on income tax, and I've worked with a group called the Heartland Institute. I'm one of their tax and budget policy advisors, so I've done a lot of studying on different tax policies and looking at different states. The states that have no income tax, and there's 9 states in the union that don't tax regular wages, they have far exceeded the rest of the country as far as economic development and job growth. So this really comes down to what can we do in Wisconsin to make Wisconsin competitive, to make sure that we're in a place where we are growing jobs and creating jobs so that my kids have a job when they grow up and stay here in Wisconsin and don't have to go somewhere else.
So you don't think you have to raise the sales tax to offset the eventual elimination of the income tax?
I think we would have to rely more on a consumption tax, a sales tax. I don't think everyone that has looked at this has looked at it as a one-to-one replacement, and they come up with ridiculous rates like 13.5%. I don't think we have to go anywhere close to that. I think we can stay in a range that is in the high single digits. I've talked to a lot of people in the Assembly about this. I've looked at it. Again, this is about it goes back to what Reagan used to say. This is not a fixed pie, the economy. We need to grow this economy. As we grow the economy, everyone benefits. And in my opinion, the best way to grow the economy is to have real income tax reform, and that's what I'm pushing for.
Two other issues, vouchers. You would like to see the enrollment caps eliminated on the school voucher program in Wisconsin. You'd also like to see there be no income requirements, if any of that. Is that the goal down the road that you'd like to see happen here?
Here's philosophically where I come from on this issue is this. And I've been very influenced by a man named Milton Friedman, who way back in the 50s was talking about school choice. I want us to move to an education savings account system, which is the only state that's doing it right now is Arizona, and they've got a good system in place. But philosophically, I believe that we are funding education as a society. We should. We want to have educated kids. But I think that we need to focus on funding students, not funding education systems. And so what that means is I would like to see a system where we're saying if we're going to spend $12,000 a year a kid on education, which is roughly what we're spending now, put that in an account, let the parent decide the best way to use that money, whether that be public schools, whether that be a charter school, whether it be a private school, whether it be homeschooling. Let the parents decide. It introduces a free market system to our education system, and I think that really ultimately is the only way that we improve the public systems. I'm interested in the kids and making sure that kids have the best education they can. I think the parents are in the best position to make those decisions, so let's empower parents. If they can get an education for less than the amount of money that we've set aside, then that money rolls over for future education expenses like college, and I think, so philosophically, that's where I want to head. Now, to get there, there's going to be steps, and so yes, I do, I agree that we need to be expanding the voucher system in the interim. I don't think that, again, when you look at it philosophically, it doesn't make any sense to me why we would have income tests on vouchers when we're already spending the money on the kids.
Jonathan Stites is one of the Republican candidates in the 21st State Senate District. We appreciate your time. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thanks for being here, for having me. I really appreciate that.
You bet. And my interview with Jonathan Stites continues now on WISN.com, where we're talking about his position on the proposed Kenosha Casino. Coming up next week on Upfront, we'll be talking to Senate District 21 candidate Van Wanggaard. And next, a surprising Democratic primary in the 4th Congressional District. Former State Senator Gary George challenging incumbent Gwen Moore. How will he convince voters to overlook his time in prison? That's when Upfront continues.
Up Front with Mike Goucher, brought to you by American Transmission Company.